back to what the core concept is. The worse the times are, the more cynical the times are, the more we need a guy that still believes in something and can inspire others to believe in something, and is an empowerment story for people who feel like they're weak.
Welcome to the Comics Cube, everyone. I am with Robb Pratt. Hi, Robb. How are you doing?
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
You want to introduce yourself? My audience is basically mostly a comics related audience, so I think an introduction would be good.
Okay, yeah, okay. Well, my name's Robb Pratt, and I grew up a traditional animator. I've been working at Disney now for about 25 years, doing everything. Traditional animation, and then having to get into story once things went CG. I still wanted to draw, and then that's now led to directing. But even going even further back, I'm a Superman freak, where if people knew how deeply I love this character, I'd probably be a little bit embarrassed. Where I can remember as a little kid, even before the Christopher Reeve movies, running around in my living room with a little towel wrapped around my shirt like a cape, watching the old George Reeves Adventures of Superman, and I loved him then. And then I delivered newspapers. That was one of my first jobs. And I remember seeing the newspaper with the first black and white, like, publicity photo of Christopher Reeve. It was one of those ones where, you know, they went to Brooklyn, I think, where they got the Manhattan skyline behind them and took all these pictures. And it was before the movie was even released. And they were just kind of announcing we found the new guy. And just, I love George Reeves, and it's awesome, and I still love him. But when I saw that Christopher Reeve image, I was like, oh my God, with the curl in his hair, he looks exactly like Superman. So this is how deep this love for this character has gone. It goes back, like, way back.
How old were you?
I'm just turned 52. So I was about 9 years old when that Christopher Reeve movie came out.
Okay. That's interesting because, like, if I look at the comics that were coming out in that era, there was he tended to be bulkier, He tended to be bulkier, and then Christopher Reeve came out, and all of a sudden everybody's just drawing him with Christopher Reeve's proportions. That's how big Christopher Reeve was. He changed the way he was drawn in the comics. Like, forever. It was amazing.
Very impactful. Yeah.
What was it about Christopher Reeve, do you think, aside from his look, that made him so special?
Well, yeah, and then when I watched the movie, it struck me as a kid. It's what an empowerment story Superman is, because I also have this deep love for Bugs Bunny, and these are characters that empower us, especially if you're a nerd like I am and was. And I had glasses, and my hair is curly when it grows out, and I was such a dork. And you get bullied at school, and you feel completely powerless. And then you see Christopher Reeve, who was also nerdy, kind of got bullied a little bit in the Daily Planet, but he was hiding a secret. And it's like, oh God, I wish I was like that. Like, maybe this is all just a facade. But if I opened my shirt and took off my glasses, I would be handsome and I would be perfect and everybody would love me. Oh, but I have to keep that a secret. So when the bullies bully me, I have to keep that secret identity quiet. And so I totally related to that Reeve Superman. And again, like I said, George Reeves was awesome, and I love him. But I do give the edge to Christopher Reeve, especially for the Clark Kent part of it, because it's that nerd empowerment story. George Reeves is so handsome. And then as Clark Kent, he was very handsome too, and he had that double-breasted suit, and he wore his hat kind of cocked back. And the thing is, like, well, then where's the fantasy? He could just be that guy, and life is fine. He doesn't. We don't need a fantasy. Reeve did the whole, the slouched shoulders, the nasally voice, and kind of blended into this metropolis. I mean, I love that scene where it's the end of his first night working there, and as he's leaving, he's saying goodnight to everybody, and people are just talking and going in the elevator and ignoring him. And that's how he does blend in, because he doesn't stand out at all. And that's how, like, a lot of kids feel. That's really what the superhero story is. When you think of the Hulk or Spider-Man or anybody, it's for us nerds who feel like we're invisible. Nobody notices us unless they're bullying us. But then we have a fantasy that we're so much more underneath.
Do you think you're talking about Clark Kent, right? There's been there's been lots of ways to depict Clark Kent over the years. You've got, there's the George Reeves method, where Clark Kent himself is a viable character. and then
Yeah.
there's the Christopher Reeve method. Do you think it takes, where they're two distinct characters? The thing that always strikes me about the Christopher Reeve movies is anybody who says that everybody would be able to tell that Clark Kent and Superman are the same guy. No, you watch Christopher Reeve do it. There's no way you can tell. You wouldn't even
Yeah.
think it. It wouldn't cross your mind.
It's
So
an acting job.
it's an acting job. But
Yeah.
do you think that there's for example, like I don't think Brandon Routh really pulled it off too well in Superman
Right.
Returns. And
Yeah.
in the Superman animated series, they went more with a George Reeves style. Like he's what 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 are the requirements you think for somebody to pull off that kind of Christopher Reeve
Yeah. It's
deception?
like, in a way, Reeve wrecked it. Like nobody could follow that up. And Ralph, tried. But his comic timing was so good, so crisp, and that's comedy's hard. Like that's why when Jim Carrey was at the top, he'd get $20 million for a movie because it's hard to make people laugh. Reeve just had really good comic timing, and that's really an end to the character because and now they're so afraid to do it because it's so hard for anybody to pull it off the way Reeve did, and they're always going to be compared to him. So they kind of just they back away from it, and that hurts the character because now, like in the more modern movies, Clark's really diminished. It's almost all about Superman, and on his own, Superman's not a very approachable guy. Like, how do we relate to a guy that is perfect and has it all together and knows all the answers? I can't relate. Clark Kent is the in to the character. That's the guy that makes me relate to him. So it's really hard, but Reeve just nailed it so hard that everyone's backing away from it now.
And do you think that's a conscious choice because they don't want to be compared to Christopher Reeve?
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at that as being silly, maybe, and they're afraid to be silly, or Batman has been just so popular over the last 20, 30 years. And he's dark and he's serious. And I think everyone's afraid now, to show a character that's a little goofy. They're just afraid of. And if somebody doesn't have the comic timing, yeah, they can't pull it off. Like, because I don't want to sit here and rail on Ralph because it's hard. And he's a good actor and he's fine. And he did a good job.
Brandon Routh is a good actor. He's just not Christopher Reeve.
It's just the bar. Reeve, that bar was raised so high. And I think Reeve, because I've done so much reading on it, I think he was looking at Cary Grant, and he's you see a lot of Cary Grant in his performance, and Cary Grant was super charming. I mean, you're talking about one of the biggest movie stars of his era. That's just a lot to pull off, and it's hard, and also the writing has to be there. So Reeve did perform it, pitch perfectly, but it was also on the written script really well too.
You think there's an alternate reality somewhere where he does not get the job? The other people who auditioned for it, Arnold, I think Sylvester Stallone auditioned for it. How different do you think that world is? Not just in terms of movies, that world.
I know, gosh, it all came together, huh? Because Richard Donner really stuck to his guns. The big rumor that Donner kept saying was that the studio was pushing for like Robert Redford, a handsome guy at the time, and then Donner argued, well, he's so big, if he comes on screen, they're not going to see Superman. They're going to see Robert Redford. And he was right. What a great call to have a fresh face. They've got the right guy, and it's that movie. A lot of it might have been silly, Reeve saves a lot of that movie. They made the right call. They lucked out. And it's funny how things change too, because now you're hearing all these, interviews with the late David Prowse, wanted the job too. He showed up and he was buff and built. And at the time, I guess Donner said, son, I'm sorry, I can't even do it. The press is going to kill me if I don't get an American to be Superman. And now we're looking at all these superhero roles.
British.
They're almost all British, right? Or there's a lot of them. But that's just like the attitude they had at the time. And it's different times too. That was around the bicentennial of America. It was very patriotic time in our country. And things are a little bit different now. So
slightly after Watergate, that's a huge thing, right?
Yeah, what a great time for him to come, because it was, a lot of my friends too, like, Rob, they can't do the goofy Superman anymore. People won't buy it. And I have to remind them, no, when he came, it was dark times too. Like Watergate, we just impeached the president. I mean, we're just a few years removed from Vietnam War, which is not a popular war. These were dark, gritty, and movies were dark and gritty. But then,
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, like maybe in these times is when you need them the most. I kind of think we need them again. And the Warner's take is so dark, and they're afraid to be goofy. And I don't know. I got really kind of annoyed when the Ralph movie, when they backed away off does he still stand for truth, justice, all that stuff, and they took the American way out of it. And I thought, oh, come on, this is when we need somebody that believes in it. Like when we are all cynical and we've given up, we need that guy that still believes in like the true version of it. But then I go back and forth. I see too how things have shifted.
That was 06. The American way was that was W. I see why.
World politics were different. And then, and now even more time has passed, and I look at Superman and I think about, immigration and what it meant when he was created. There was a big influx into this country from Europeans that were fleeing from World War II. So their idea of going to America was like, I'm leaving my past because it was really bad. We were getting tortured or whatever, and we had to give up a lot to leave. And I want to buy into this new concept of I'm American now. And my dad is kind of a example of that. He came from Denmark because the Nazis were kind of giving the Danes a hard time about IDing their Jews, and he had to get on a rowboat and get the hell out of there. And his mom, like my grandmother, got put in a concentration camp, got caught. So he was fleeing a place.
Sorry to hear that.
Oh, thank you. She actually made it through though. She got liberated after the war.
I'm glad to hear that.
But he fled. He came to America, and his whole thing was, I want to assimilate. I want to be a new thing. I want to be American now. My past is kind of scary, and he got like a new, a more Americanized name and learned English, and that was kind of the immigrant story from that era. And that's what Superman is too. Like, again, the Reeve movie nails it so hard because the climax of the movie, he has to make a decision. Do I listen to my heritage telling me I'm not allowed to interfere with human history? Or do I listen to the American way? I'm here for a reason. And he chooses the American way. That was very much like the American immigrant ideal at that time. And now it's a little bit different. Our immigrants here now kind of still want to be like, hey, I came from somewhere and I'm still celebrating it. I'm not coming from a war-torn place. I'm coming from a place that I still want to celebrate. So that kind of concept has changed and evolved a little bit. So, now it doesn't bother me so much to take the American way out of that thing. I could see, arguments either way, right? Still somebody believing in at least when America's let you down, I believe in the idealized version of what America should be.
I do too. I lived in America for a while, and I have a concept of what the American dream is, but I think the thing is that when you say it out loud, some people do not have a good concept of what the American way is. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And that includes people in America and out of America. But
yeah. That is one of the better scenes in the Donner one too, because again, it was gritty times. People were down on the country. They didn't trust their government. They didn't trust their president. And they played Lois Lane as being the cynical American that says, what are you here for? And then when he says that corny line, she kind of laughs him off, but then realizes, like he had the immigrant point of view. I come here with the rose-colored glasses and I see the idealized what America should be. And the people that are in America are kind of cynical because it's not living up to what they would hope it would be.
Yeah, I have a friend who says that Lois Lane in that movie is us. She's us.
Yeah.
And she's super important to that movie because she's basically how we would react to Superman if he randomly showed up. Speaking of Lois Lane, is Lois Lane your preferred Superman ship?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be.
Of course,
she's a great character. I mean, maybe the best comic book character still. There's so many good arguments, right? And there's so many great characters. But what I love about Lois, she doesn't even have superpowers, and and then, from the era she's created, it was a woman working in a man's world, and yet she was tough, but never complained about I don't get this or I don't get that. Like she's too busy to complain. She's working her tail off to be the best reporter. She's just doing it. And I just love her. She's a fantastic character. She's my favorite. It's funny that Superman is my favorite comic book character, but she is also my favorite comic book female character. Right? She's just awesome. Love her.
In many ways, she's she's the better character because in a lot of ways she drives the story.
Yeah.
He ends up helping her out or saving her because, and it's not that she's a bad reporter that she needs to be saved. It's actually that she's a very good reporter and she ends up getting in all of these situations that no other reporter would be caught dead in.
Right, they'd be too scared to do it, but not Lois. She jumps in.
Yeah, I had Fred Van Lente on the show, and he was doing a comic about the comic book history of animation, and we were talking about the Fleischer Supermans, and he was like, what I love about Lois in that show is that she has all of the survival instincts of a toddler.
Right, yeah.
Just like, let me just climb into a big giant robot.
Yeah. But she's passionate about what she does, and passion is what inspires others.
Speaking of, you're an animator, so about the Fleischer Superman show. Like,
yeah.
How big was that? How big is the Fleischer Superman show in animation history? How big is it for a Superman fan?
Yeah, that's funny. When I grew up watching Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, and here in LA, we had a local show. Man, we were spoiled. Sunday mornings, we got 3 hours of like Popeyes hosted by Tom Hatton. And I watched those, and those are really influential on me. I love the Fleischers. And
the Fleischer Popeyes, right?
Fleischer Popeyes.
Yeah.
And he would mix in other little things. That's where I saw, like, he would mix in weird things like George of the Jungle would be in there and Tom Slick. But by and large, the 3 hours was on Popeye cartoons. And he would have shown those Superman cartoons, but they were kind of like lost in that era. This is like early 80s, late 70s. No one was watching those. And then when I was 19, so 10 years later, and that's maybe late 80s now, 90s, they started to come out on bootleg VHS. Or I went to a Spike and Mike Festival of Animation, a traveling animation festival that would show mostly student films, but they said, we've got a special treat for you. We're going to show this Fleischer Superman. And I was like, wait, I know Fleischer and I know Superman. I didn't know this. And then he showed the first one, and oh my God, my eyes popped out of my head. I couldn't believe these things existed, and I never knew about them with all the Popeye watching I did. So I went to a local comic convention that would come here late. It's like once a month, I think we get one at the Shrine Auditorium. And I looked for it, and I found all 17 on a VHS. And I watched those on a loop. They are gorgeous. They are still, like, to this day, one of the most beautiful things ever made. And with all due respect to George Reeves, all due respect to Richard Donner and Christopher Reeve, those are still, I think, my favorite Superman things that are committed to film. They're the first things that were put on film for Superman, and they're still the best for me.
Is that when you decided you wanted to animate Superman?
A little bit. I mean, that was always on the back burner, and I did have a conversation with a friend at Disney. I got into Disney, and then my aunt was working on Pocahontas. That was my first movie. And then in conversation with friends, it didn't take long for them to all figure out that I was a Superman nut. And they did ask, like, God, if you got your dream job, what would it be? Would yours be Superman? And I remember saying, no, I still want to be a fan. I don't want to do it. I want to see other people do it. But then years went by, and then I saw versions where, well, now I'm just a pain in the ass to watch any of this with, because I'm too particular, I'm too close to it. So I would see Lois and Clark, The Adventures of Superman came on, and I would be like, well, I like this and I like this, but I don't like this and I don't like this. And then the Brandon Routh came on. I like this and I like this, but I don't like this and I don't like this. And then there was that little empty period where I guess Warner's decided Superman Returns was not a big enough hit. There's not going to be a sequel, and there was a little dead spot. And then that's where I'm like, okay, I met, just on a limb, I met John Newton, who played Superboy on TV when I was a kid at a Halloween event. I just took my kids to this Halloween thing, and I recognized him, and I went and introduced myself, and he's a great guy. Now he's like a dear friend, one of my best friendships in my life now.
That's
I love
awesome.
the guy.
That's awesome.
And from this, like, talking, excited, and I asked him so many questions about Superman, and that show was produced by Salkin, who produced the Superman movies. So we hit it off, and then that was like, okay, I have a lull in my career. It looks like a job is ending. I'm probably going to get laid off. I'll probably, there might be a gap between my next thing. I'm still going to wake up at 8 a.m. and I'm going to animate like a Superman thing. And I pitched it to John, and I go, it'd be kind of like the Fleischers, but then they didn't have the Christopher Reeve. He's got to push up his glasses. I want to mix in like all the Superman from the ages, all the best things. And there's a piece of music, Kirk Allen serials. It's 1 minute. I think I hadn't really put together an animated film yet. I was like, I think I can do a 1 minute. That might be, and animate it to the music, so it looks like it was scored to picture. And I had John and his wife Jennifer over a glass of wine. I was showing them images from Sky Captain, and
Nice.
I'm thinking like, what if it was like that, but with kind of the Reeve take? But then I'll design the character to look a little bit like you, John. And then John offered to do the voice of the character, and that's like, okay, well now I have to do it. I got a real guy that wore the cape. There's no looking back now. And then his wife offered to do Lois, and she's, oh my God, her Lois is great. And I got one of these days I'll have to share the tapes too. When I recorded Jennifer, she's like, well, what do you want me to look at? And I go, well, you got to look at Rosalind Russell, right? Because that's kind of Lois Lane from the Philadelphia story. And then she's the tough, girl working at a newspaper amongst men, but she's the toughest one. And so her first take was very throwback 40s, kind of that snappy talk, And then I said, well, okay, I'm glad we got it. That's great. Thank you for doing it. Let's also get like, I love Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, think about that was a period piece, but everybody kind of talked, regular, like it was accessible to that audience. I go, let's kind of do that. It'll be a throwback piece, but let's not like go so campy that they talk that lingo. And then she gave her great performance that I used, and it's awesome. But one of these days, I should share her first take because it's really incredible too.
If you want, you can send it over to me.
yeah. Let me
put it right here.
Dig it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you also animated the one with Bizarro.
Right. Yeah. So once this Superman classic, of course I had dreams. Bruce Timm had animated like a little 1 minute Batman promo, and it kind of got him the gig for Batman, and his whole career took off. And of course, you have these dreams like, oh, what if I did it for Superman, and I could be the Bruce Timm of Superman, Yeah. And so and that wasn't like solely the only reason I did it. I did it because it was fun. I did it out of love. But you kind of dream like, oh, what if that happened? And I posted it, and then I had a meeting with Warner's, and it went really great. It looked like maybe it was going to happen for a while. And no papers were signed. It didn't get that far. And professionally, I should have just not done anything. But I got so excited. I had this meeting at Warner's. I went home and I drew an adventure with Bizarro. I drew an adventure with Brainiac. I wrote one about Lex Luthor. I know what I want to do with that one. I had all these adventures lined up. And then with Warner's, it wasn't like, it didn't just fall apart like the next day. It took a few months to kind of like not happen. And so that whole time I was drawing the Bizarro one, and I did board out the Brainiac one, and I was showing them to John, and then John recorded his voice for both of them. And John actually liked the Brainiac one more. But me, I think because I played this game with my kids where, now that you can loop dialogue backwards so easily on your computer, I would play this game with my kids where I'd say, hey, why don't you say something? Say like, I like chocolate. And then we would record it, and then we would flip it backwards, and we would listen to it. And then we go, okay, listen to it a few times, and then try to imitate the backwards version and say it, and then we'll flop it and see how close you got. So it was like this fun game with backwards recording. So with Bizarro, I thought, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool to do that with Bizarro's line? Then I got me am Superman, Namrapus Ma Eve, and play it backwards. And I was so fixated on doing that gimmick and then doing the music backwards that I wanted to do that one. But the thing that was cool about the Brainiac one, I think that John liked, because later on I ended up doing a Flash Gordon one. Yeah. That Brainiac one's almost a mashup of Flash Gordon and Superman because it's got to be in that period. It's got to be in that World War II, that late 30s Art Deco period. And Brainiac, one of his calling cards is he rides around in this skull ship. And I thought, then his skull ship, what would it look like an Art Deco version? It would be kind of like a little bit like Rocketeer's helmet, but a skull with the brain showing, but metal and shiny and streamlined. And then the interior would have all the bracketing on the inside, like the inside of Buster Crabbe's Flash Gordon ship. So it has a really cool kind of pulpy 30s, futuristic deco thing. And John thought that was so cool. And I do too, but I just was so into that recording of the Bizarro one that one went first. And then, and then the Warner stuff didn't happen. And they kind of let me know, hey, it was kind of cool that you did one as a fan film, but you can't like keep doing these. And I like to think because they look so polished that maybe they were worried that
they look official.
that they look official, because other fan films are out there, and I thought that would kind of cover me. But I guess, if you can tell that's a fan film, maybe with mine they couldn't tell, and that makes me feel good. But
Because you're an actual professional, though.
yeah,
That's
maybe
a
it's
big
not
part
fair.
of what it is. I'm
Yeah.
sure. I know. So you're Flash Gordon Superman. I'm told you're also a Back to the Future fan, as am I.
Oh my God, Back to the Future, like the perfect movie. Like
Yeah.
really,
Yes, it
everything's
is.
just Yeah, and anyone studying story, and now I tell my story artists that I work with professionally, I go, you can learn almost everything you need to know about story from Back to the Future. The way you set up and pay off jokes, the way you communicate information, a surreal thing like time travel. How do you make that clear? It shows it clearly, and then it's got humor, but then it's got edge of your seat set pieces. Like it's just really the perfect movie, and like it's
And
a
the
family movie.
score, the
The
score.
score, and then to say, like, when you hear that title family movie, you're like, oh boy, well, this is something I gotta watch with little kids, but it's not gonna entertain me. But Back to the Future is really a family, like everybody in the family can watch that movie and enjoy it. It's just like it's the perfect movie.
So what is it about these future forward characters, these future forward properties that you love so much, but you love depicting them in a retro way?
Yeah, I know. I do love retro, even as a little kid. And maybe that's a byproduct of watching those Fleischer Popeye cartoons, because they were all made in the 30s and 40s. And so even the houses had a certain charm aesthetic to them. The buildings, the cars, the music, it all had like this retro, and the Looney Tunes, they're all made in that era too. So as a young kid, I love that era, and charm. They could just do charm. And movies then were charming. And it's funny how those old movies could do charm. Everybody could do charm, but nobody could do special effects, because that was hard until Lucasfilm came in the 70s and flipped it. And now it's almost the opposite for me. When I watch a movie, the effects are no problem. Anybody can do them. But now charm is the hard thing. People can't do charm. So I just grew up on that charm and Popeye, like the visual gags. If Popeye, even before he had spinach, if he's walking and you can already see he's a tough guy, and like a cart or something is in his way, he'll punch it, and all the pieces will fly, and then they'll come back and rearrange themselves into a little bridge, and then Popeye will walk on that bridge, and it's so damn charming, and people don't do that charm on that level anymore. So that's why I loved like trying to do that charm that I love with these properties.
Can I give you a challenge, Rob? Can you
Yeah,
go ahead,
please.
do your best, try to name another property that's even remotely like Popeye?
I know, God, it's so they can't do Popeye anymore because
Right.
everything's so like politically incorrect with him, and he's got tattoos, he fights, everybody's ugly, like
Right? Like, where do you find something where the main character is ugly and then it's really just about him and this other guy fighting over this girl, and both of the guys are ugly, and like, all of a sudden there's a sea hag.
Yeah, isn't it so wonderful? And one of those early shorts, I remember they went to the beach and they're panning, and we're seeing all these bathing classic beauties, but then it goes past Olive, and then the camera like goes back to Olive and zooms in on her, like she's the one that they're focused on. It's just it's so marvelous. It's so funny.
I love Popeye. There's nothing like it, and I don't think there's ever been anything like it since.
No, I can't live up to your challenge. I can't think of anything.
Even the idea of getting super strength from eating the spinach, it's like,
Yeah.
no.
Well, where is that?
Where's that now?
Yeah, but we buy it somehow. We still buy it.
I want a new character created that will also sell vegetables.
Yeah.
Getting back to Superman. Superman is one of my favorite characters, like, ever, of all time. I think he stands for a lot of stuff. We skipped a couple of key adaptations. I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on that. You were talking about being the Bruce Timm of Superman.
Yeah.
Bruce Timm actually was on Superman. What do you think about
Yeah.
that particular cartoon?
Well, and here's me. Look, and I don't want to do anything to disparage him. He's one of my heroes. But this is where I'm a pain in the ass to watch anything with, right? So I watch it, and there's things that I love, and then there's things that I wish were different. The architecture is it's not deco, right? It's kind of like almost art
Futuristic.
moderne, futuristic.
Yeah.
And for me, and then you can see what my take was on those buildings in New York that were built in the 20s and 30s and that Art Deco, they're very dramatic. They're so bold. And I do love Art Deco. And Art Deco did in the 50s kind of get streamlined and a lot of the details taken off. So it was simplified. And I love that too. But it lost some of the drama. Those buildings of the 30s are dramatic and they're always lit from the street, so they're bottom lit and they get dark as they grow up, and then they can contrast with the sky. And he did more of that in the Batman show, because that was all about mood and drama. And for Superman,
the Batman show is openly influenced by the Fleischer Supermans, ironically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they took the drama from the Fleischers, and I'm guessing, I wasn't there in the room. I'm guessing they thought, well, let's make Superman a companion piece to what we did with Batman and make it lighter and everything. And Frank Miller's Dark Knight kind of did that, where Superman panels were all brightly lit and the Batman panels were dark. So I'm guessing that's the way they went. But to me, it misses that drama. And then, like we said at the opening, their take on Clark was much more George Reeves, where he's cool in either role. And I like the Reeve one for all the things we said. That it's got to be an empowerment story. It's got to be the nerd. That's my end of the character. That's how I relate to him. How do I relate to a guy that has it all together? I relate to a guy that, the prettiest girl around doesn't even know I exist. She completely ignores me. And I want a fantasy where I'm super, and now I can turn the tables on her, and then she'll want to kiss me, but I'm too, I don't have the time for her anymore. That's a very real empowerment story for especially teenage boys, so. Yeah. So those are the two big things, but then the design aesthetic to it. Bruce Timm's design is awesome. Oh my God, it's so great, and the action sequences are fantastic, and there is so much that I do love about it. But those are my little gripes. But that's me being a pain in the ass. I just can't. I'm too close to it.
I love that cartoon, but I do feel like whether it was by their design or by the designs of the higher ups, I do feel like something was being held back. And I think you could kind of see it because in Justice League, Superman gets cut loose in Justice League Unlimited. You actually see him do more than he did in his own cartoon.
Right. But then you don't have Clark Kent in there, so that's the tough end of the character. Yeah, relating to this guy that's just so perfect.
Have you been reading the comics?
Not lately. I haven't. It's just time. There's just
I understand.
Career, family, and then trying to do animation, which is I fell in love with this art form that is so time consuming. And I had to relate this to somebody last week, where Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You got Robert Zemeckis. We're talking about Back to the Future. When he got done with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he even said, "God, if I knew how tedious it was to do animation, I would have never even taken this gig." Because he's used to filming a movie in like 6 weeks and then it's done. And then animation that takes I can't see this pencil test for a couple of weeks as the animator's working on it, this one shot. I'm used to just filming a shot and seeing it immediately. It's just a labor intensive, tedious art form, but I love it so much. It just takes up so much time.
Yeah, I hear about that. So for the viewers, Rob and I have a mutual friend, and she always says she's working on something, and I know I'm not going to see it for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
It's insane. That's how long it takes.
It is.
And comics artists too, they'll express the frustration at having to draw the same thing in succeeding panels. And I get it. It sounds really frustrating, but I can't even imagine how hard that is for animators.
Yeah, it takes forever. And then if you want to produce it in color, it's not just drawing 24 drawings for one fluid second of movement. Now you got to color 24 drawings. It just takes forever.
And with I was asking about the comics because I wanted to know your thoughts, and I think I know what your answer is going to be. But Superman, married or not married to Lois Lane?
Well, this is tough because the character, how do you write a character for so many years? Ideally, I like Superman classic, just the classic version. He has to hide the identity from Lois, and he's secretly pining for her, and all that. But you just can't sustain that forever. So I see why they have to do these things. And but I will always, the strongest version of the idea is always the original idea for me.
So do you
The
think
other ones are just kind of contending. The other ones are just kind of contending with we need to write more material.
so do you think if you were to actually showrun a Superman cartoon, and like let's say you got like 4 or 5 seasons on it. I know that's a long shot in today's society, in today's
Yeah,
animation
yeah,
industry. Let's say 3 seasons.
yeah,
You get
yeah, yeah.
around 22 episodes each season. Would you, and I'm sure you start with classic, would you eventually
Yeah.
have her find out?
Oh, I think at some point, if in that amount of time, you'd have to. And then also, um, as brilliant as his disguise is, that Lois is very sharp, and at some point she would have to figure it out. But boy, I would try to
Try to
push it
drag
off
that
for
out
as
as
long as
long
I
as
can.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one thing I have given some thought to is, in a series, how do you, because you're writing so many stuff, one thing that would be great is handling Lex Luthor in a series for me, because you have a couple different versions of Lex. You have the early classic version where he's kind of a mad scientist that's out on the run. He's a criminal. And then you have the John Byrne 80s
Whose
version.
sole motivation is that Superboy made him bald.
Right. Yeah. But getting to the John Byrne, which is kind of a commentary on 80s, greed, corporate, you have the businessman Lex. So like,
Yeah.
which one do you do? But
Which
if you
one would
have a
you do?
series, I would do both, because if you had a series, I would start him out as the corporate Lex doing all of his stuff. But come on, he can fool everybody, but he can't fool Superman. Eventually, Superman would expose him, and then he would have to go into his on the run criminal guy, and then he would turn into the original. I'd flip it. He would turn into the classic Lex that's on the run.
That's
with his secret
interesting.
hideouts. Yeah.
That reminds me of Gargoyles.
Right.
Not,
Yeah.
not so
There's
much
some.
but except in that one they did Xanatos at the same time. He was a businessman and he was the armored guy all at the same time.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And who's your favorite Superman villain? Is it Lex?
It is Lex. I know people get frustrated that he's so overused, but if it's the ultimate, mind over muscle, as Gene Hackman says in the Donner movie, that's the perfect villain for him, right? The guy that can outsmart Superman.
Speaking of the Donner movie, my hot take for the Donner movie has always been, if Christopher Reeve weren't Superman in that one, I actually think it's a bad movie.
Yeah, you might be right. He did save that thing.
Like, I'm not sure the plot really works too well. I'm not sure.
There are a lot of holes.
I'm not sure that I think it's a little too long. There's
Yeah.
no big fight scene, which I think in today's day and age is a weird thing. And
Yeah.
The ending where he turns back time is,
Yeah, which is a mess.
yeah.
As much as I love the movie, that's a mess. Yeah.
But because Christopher Reeve did such a good job, the movie's a classic.
Right. You can't root against him. It's funny. Hackman is so charming too and funny, but it's funny what saves that movie is that Lex beat him. Lex got him. He was going to kill him. But Superman is so good, and you can't root it. Even Miss Tessmacher can't sit by and see the guy fail, because and Reeve helps make that believable.
Another question I have is, what do you think of supporting characters like the Daily Planet guys and Lana Lang? I feel like Lana especially has been thrown by the wayside in recent years. Where do you think his supporting cast fits in now?
Well, and to keep to their archetypes, right? Like, there's a reason why Superman would fall in love with Lois, because he was raised in a small town, and to go to a big city and see a tough girl, that must be so intriguing to him. So she fulfills that archetype of like the strong person. So then Lana really should always be, what he grew up with is the girl next door, and that's how they handled her. There has to be so much material. You have to reinvent these things, or you're just going to run out of material. So I always look at the classic, and the classic's the best idea. And that's the angle they took in the Donner movies again, when they showed her in part 3 and got Annette O'Toole to play her. She was like, that's the safe girl, the girl next door, the girl that we would all have a crush on, and she's so sweet. And I think you play her that type against the Lois type, and vice versa.
And the Daily Planet, you think like how would you approach the Daily Planet in today's day and age with, you know, our relationship to news and media? And
a lot of it doesn't work. I mean, or it's just really represents a bigger challenge. Like it's in the 30s, that's where you got your news from the newspaper, and the Daily Planet was the center for news for the world, and that's why he needs to work there so he can find out the stories. And boy, now even, you know, with television and Superman being caught on television, and now with the internet, like people would figure out his identity, and it just, a lot of it can still work, but I do think it works best in its time, you know. And I love, like Indiana Jones, I love Indiana Jones too, and that's like, boy, making new movies, the thing that fights it is Indy really works in pre-World War II. You know, like that. It sounds like I'm going off base, but this is to just to make an example. After World War II, the United Nations agreed, look, you can't go into other people's countries and take their artifacts out of their country. Like, it has to stay there. And that kind of defeats Indiana Jones, because he's a grave robber. What he does is goes into other countries and takes their things. He's not like a good guy like Superman is. He's kind of a scoundrel, you know, which is Harrison Ford is so good. So
it's just that he ends up fighting Nazis.
Yeah, that maybe that's his saving grace to us.
That's why he's a good guy.
Yeah. But there's like great lines in the second movie where he's at that dinner table, you know, and they have all the distractions of all the crazy foods that Indians don't really eat, but they're making it a pulpy thing. But when you sit and listen to the dialogue, you know, Indy even has to say, like, I think the prime minister puts him on the spot, like, in Honduras, weren't they going to threaten to cut your hands off because you were stealing things from, you know, he's kind of a scoundrel. But so when once that agreement's made that you can't take artifacts, that kind of hurts Indiana Jones now, because if you put him in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, it's harder to get him to do his Indiana Jones thing. And very similarly, that's what I'm saying with Superman. He's so great in 1938. You can still do him after that, but it's not going to be quite as great as the original story.
Do you think the whole thing about let me put it this way: what's more important to Superman, Metropolis or Krypton?
Well, you know, and I do.
In your 3 seasons of 22 episodes each, how much time would you spend on his Kryptonian heritage?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You know what? I really am not very interested in Krypton.
So would we not see Supergirl, the Bottled City of Kandor?
We would see the stuff that comes from it, but like they just recently had that series Krypton, and I just couldn't latch onto it. To me, it's an explanation for where that, like, it's his backstory and what explains him, but the entity itself, I don't know if it's that interesting to me. Like, Superman is the interesting. That's where the camera should be. It should be on the most interesting character. He's the most interesting character, and Krypton's just kind of there to explain him. And, you know, a lot of things are left better to the audience imagination anyways. Like, one thing that Spielberg and Lucas, like, what a great thing to grow up in the 80s and grow up on Steven Spielberg and George Lucas movies. Mm-hmm. They understood this point. Star Wars, with all the effects in it and lightsabers and spaceships, one of the things that intrigued me the most as an 8-year-old, when I was 8 when I saw it, was just that conversation when Obi-Wan, and no flashbacks. Flashbacks are not part of the Star Wars screen language. Let us imagine it. They screwed that up in the new movies. There's no flashbacks. We just hear Obi-Wan saying, "I was a Jedi Knight and I fought in the Clone Wars with your father." Oh my God, my head exploded. Like, there was other stuff that happened off screen that I'm just hearing about, and I get to imagine it myself. Don't ever show it to me. It's not going to live up to my imagination. It's great. And Indiana Jones did that too, with, you know, all this kind of off-screen history. You know, when Indy gets shot in the nightclub, and or his buddy gets shot in the nightclub, and his buddy goes, "Indy, I followed you on many adventures, but now to the great unknown. I go first, Indy." And like, oh, they had other adventures that I'm not seeing, or how did, you know, when she asked, "How did you meet Short Round?" "Oh, he was wandering the streets and he picked my pocket." Like, I love like all this off-screen stuff, and to imagine it is so great. Don't take that away from the audience. Let them imagine it. And for me, I love to imagine Krypton, but I don't know if I want to see somebody else spell it out for me and what was happening there. It's mysterious, and it was far away. It was so far away. It took the rocket ship, I don't know, years to get here. So he would never go back because it's just too far of a journey. It's mysterious. And the people there, they elevated their standard of life was so high that all of them would have been a Superman if they came here. It's so cool. I don't know if I want to see it explained for me. I want it just enough information to make me imagine it.
I feel like, and I don't know if this is a byproduct of binge watching, DVDs, streaming, just everything being available. But I feel like we've been conditioned in the last decade or so to that we have to start from the very beginning, and that everything's got to be explained. But I feel like when I was a kid, I just kind of jumped into stuff. Like I jumped into a movie midway through. I jumped into a TV show midway through.
It's fun.
I never had the first issue of a comic.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that's, I don't know. I feel like that's something
that's fun to imagine
now,
it, isn't it?
Right?
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is. It's fun to theater of the mind. Let people fill in blank, give them just enough information. I kind of, I said you can learn everything you need to know about story from Back to the Future. Also, I equate it to a crossword puzzle. Why do people even do crossword puzzles? It's because they see a clue and they fill it in and they get a little high. Like, hey, I'm smart. I figured something out.
Yes.
So the story should be like a crossword puzzle. Give them like the across clue and maybe even the down clue. Yeah. Give them just that information, and then let them feel good about themselves. Now they're engaged in your story because they feel smart by figuring something out.
Yeah, I was reading. My niece is reading the Jane Foster Thor comics, and stuff happens in it. Stuff happens in other titles that affects it. And I was saying to her, like, what do you think about that? Does that like throw you off that stuff is happening in other titles? And he's like, no, that just means stuff is happening in this world. And that makes the whole world richer. I don't need to know the details of the other things that are happening. It's just nice to know that other things are happening, because that's how the real world would actually be. And I go, does it make you want to read those comics? And she goes, no. Okay.
She likes just enough information to fill in the blanks herself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna there's another. Wait, hold on. I'm going to throw you a couple of Superman preconceptions, and I want you to respond to them. Number one, Superman is too powerful to write well.
Well, it certainly creates a challenge for him, right? Because you got to bring your A game writing Superman. A lot of the more I look into the story business, again, I come back to the Future. Limitations make the situation. It's all about the limitations. That DeLorean Doc Brown made, he could have just made it where you just turn it on and it goes wherever you want to go. But no, they put in a limitation. This thing needs 1.21 gigawatts, and that drives the whole plot. Now they have to get that car powered because of a limitation, and then so putting limitations in and seeing your characters succeed in spite of their limitations is what's fun. I'm not a big fan of like Rey in the new Star Wars movies, because every time she's backed into a corner, there's just a brand new force power. You never see her limited to where she has to use her wits. She has to be smart about what she does to win the day, because really it's primal. It's written into our DNA as cavemen even, to admire smart. We want to see the smartest characters and what they do. Like when you watch The Godfather, why are you rooting for the Corleone family? There's 5 crime families. They all are murderers. Why are we rooting for the Corleones? Because they're the smart ones. We're rooting for the family that outsmarts the other ones. And that's what's so brilliant about Superman 2 is when he beats General Zod and Non and Ursa. He didn't beat them in a punching match. Superman outsmarted them. He knew, I'm going to say something, and Lex Luthor, I know the pieces involved. Lex Luthor is going to turn on me, so I'm going to say a thing. Use Lex. Lex is going to convince General Zod that this thing is going to depower him, and he outsmarts him. What a great ending! He didn't use his heat vision. He didn't use flying, his super strength. He outsmarted him. A caveman would watch that and go, "Oh my God, that's my guy."
he did use his super cellophane S,
Right? Yeah.
a
Yeah.
superpower that has never shown up again ever since.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love Superman 2 more than Superman 1, and it's because of Zod. It's
Yeah.
almost completely because
That.
of Zod. He's amazing. Terrence Stamp is
Yeah.
amazing.
He
Zod.
is, what a great villain. Oh my God. And of all the Superman that's been in media, comic books, film, cartoons, TV shows, I think if it's hard to do this, but if I had to single out my single favorite moment of Superman, the one moment that is the best, it is when Zod offers his hand to
Okay.
Neil, and Superman takes his hand and then crushes it, and you hear the John Williams theme, and he lifts him up, and we reveal that Superman outsmarted him. I think that's the greatest moment in that character's history.
For me, from that movie, it's General, would you care to step outside?
Yeah,
Come
that's
to
great.
me, son of Jor-El, kneel before Zod. What a
And isn't
what a
yeah,
moment. What a
and isn't
moment.
that wonderful? Like, and I love Richard Donner's take on the character maybe more than Richard Lester, who camped it up. And Richard Lester's taken a beating from fans over the years from adding camp. But now, when you see the Donner cut of part 2, you see what was scripted was that "Don't you believe in freedom of the press?" And then it must have been Lester that came in and changed the line to a callback from the bullying scene. That's great. That's awesome. Like, Lester did something really great.
Yeah.
He made a fantastic moment.
The other misconception is wait, so in that case you would place limitations on Superman or on the challenges around him?
The challenges around him. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's a writer's crutch to, like, okay, well, let's depower Superman so we can actually write a story. And I'm like, no, that's you're being lazy. He's got superpowers. You got to deal with it. What happens when you put a guy that's invulnerable now what's the challenge going to be? And a lot of it with Superman is he cares for other people. There's collateral damage that he would be worried about. What if he fails? Like, if Batman fails, that could be bad news for some people. But if Superman fails, oh my God, the consequences are huge.
You know what I always found weird about depowering him is that every other fantasy character ever, like the scene where Spider-Man lifts up that all that debris from his he's buried under a bunch of debris and he lifts it up. It's like the whole point of that scene is that he's calling on more strength than he's ever had to call on before. And I'm like,
Right.
the point, if you depower Superman and then you limit him to a particular thing, then he can't do that. He can't
Right.
ever be like, I'm going beyond my limits, because you're setting up his limits too much.
Yeah,
Because
that's
you're
right. You
you're
can't break the
dictating.
rules.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he can't break
rules
the
are fun to
rules.
track. Yeah.
And the next misconception is no one this powerful would be this good.
Yeah, I try to think of myself as a nice guy, but God, if I had those powers and I get road rage, oh my God, I'd be taking people out of their cars and throwing their cars miles away, saying, "You can't drive anymore. You don't know how to do this." How does he stay so nice? How does that guy stay grounded? And maybe that is, with all the stuff that's hard to write about him and that he's invulnerable, it's also the challenge of making him always do the right thing. Like, how does a guy that has all these powers do the right thing? And that's probably what makes him interesting, because he's doing what we wouldn't do.
Yeah. I mean, I think with in recent years you can kind of see it with Chris Evans, Captain America.
Yeah, that's right.
I think he gets that character. I'll say if he played Superman, I think he could.
Yeah. Again, for all my friends that would rail, Rob, you can't do the goody two shoes Superman. Nobody, people would laugh at it. Huh? They did it with Captain America.
They did,
and they did it well. And I buy that he's earnest. I cannot root against him. I always rooting for him because he's such a good guy. And wasn't it great in that second movie when everyone had to turn keys to shoot missiles or something, and they had guns to their heads? And then one guy said, "I can't do it. Captain's orders." I mean, come on. He inspired other people to be better than they are.
He gives a speech, and it's inspiring. And like when he's, by the end of it, he and Iron Man are basically like the two cores of the universe. I thought that was you and now it's weird like seeing them go on without it. So let's go open up a can of worms here.
Yeah.
I think you know what my next question is going to be.
I'm not sure.
Speaking of film adaptations of Superman, what do you think of Henry Cavill?
Yeah, I think the actor's probably pretty good. He seems pretty charming, and I've been saying how much I love charm, and I've seen him in other roles that's charming. I think he's pretty good. He looks the part, and I think got women are always saying he's like the most handsome Superman. I think he's great.
He looks exactly like Christopher Reeve. I don't get it. He looks exactly like him.
yeah, he does. I mean, because they both look like Superman, you know, and I'm really invested in him. I like him. Again, me being pain in the butt, there's a lot about maybe the current take in the movies that I'm not connecting with. A lot of it is diminishing the Clark Kent thing. And then even when they try to imitate it, I see, I'm not buying it. The first Man of Steel movie, they tried to put the bar scene in there where a guy bullied him and threw a can at him. But like the guy is built, like he's built like a brick, what house. And I'm not buying that little wimp would like bully him, so we're not getting that Christopher Reeve, Clark Kent dynamic there. It's just not built into it. So a lot of it, the very structure of it is falling apart for me, because if I was just that guy, that handsome guy, life would be, I'm big and buff and I'm handsome, I'm fine. Where's the fantasy angle on it? So right away, I'm not connecting to the character. He's just like that's another thing. Learn from Back to the Future. I know in Back to the Future what everybody wants. I know what Biff wants. I know what Marty wants. I know what Doc Brown wants. It's all very clear what their goals are. And when I watch the new version of Superman, I don't even know what he wants. Like, he's very quiet, and that's not Henry's fault. There's nothing in the script that lets him emote what he wants. The Christopher Reeve movie, it's very clear what he wants. Lois asks him point blank, why are you here? I'm here to fight for truth, justice, and the American way. I know what he wants. I know I can get behind him. How can you get behind a character when you don't even know what they want? And really at the core of why do we get behind any character? I'm not even a boxing fan, and I love Rocky. Oh my God, Rocky Balboa. I want to see this guy succeed. Why? Because he's passionate. He passionately wants something. And so now I want to see him achieve that dream because he wants it so passionately. So how can you get behind a character if you don't know what they want? And poor Henry, that guy I think the guy checks off a lot of boxes. He's really good, but it's not clear like what he wants. And that hurts it for me.
And I think that first movie, speaking about what they wanted, the Phantom Zone guys always just keep telling him that they just want a world of their own. And in my mind, I'm like, then go to Mars.
Right? Yeah, you can live there. Yeah,
you can literally live there.
Yeah.
With your powers, you can make like buildings and stuff like right away. Go to Mars.
Right? Yeah, that is funny.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
And what are you you said Pocahontas was the first assignment that you had for Disney. What are you working on now?
Yeah. Well, I just finished on, we did a television series, Elena of Avalor, which is a Disney princess in the angle that she's a Latina princess. And we just wrapped that up. And so now I'm on a brand new show, but it's not been announced yet. So unfortunately, I can't say anything about it.
And of all of the stuff that you've worked on, do you have anything that you're proudest of?
Wow, there's so many, the highlights too. I got to be a traditional animator when that was still on paper, where you rolled the drawings and saw the movement happening in front of you and chipped away at it. And oh my God, it was bliss. It's like, I wanted it to go for 60 years. I wanted to be, an old man animator for it. It was fantastic. And I got to work on Kerchak, which is an ape, and Tarzan. It's kind of Tarzan's father figure. And Disney wanted us to feel like the old animators from Bambi who had live deer to draw from. So they got us all passes to the zoo and to study apes and draw apes like a real Disney animator. And what a highlight. And then I got to, in the legends I got to work with, and I got to animate Milo Thatch in Atlantis, and the voice was Michael J. Fox. So I got to animate 2 Michael J. Fox, like one of my favorite guys from my favorite movie, and just the guys I got to work with, Eric Goldberg and Bruce Smith, and I got Randy Haycock and Andreas Deja, like the list goes, Mark Henn. I could go on. I don't want to leave anybody out. John Pomeroy, like legends in the field. And I grew up really poor, and I didn't get to go to a school. And the fact that I worked my tail off to where I could at least just be running with these guys, it's unbelievable. And it was heartbreaking when 2D went away. I don't know if history will ever really know that story of how heartbreaking, because it's 300 artists that you grow up as a kid watching Pinocchio and Bambi, and you want to do this, and then you finally make it, and you're there, and it's bliss, and you're on the Disney lot where Walt Disney walked, and then CG came along, and it all went away, and it was heartbreaking, and we all lost our jobs, and I had to reinvent myself. I got 10 years of it, and it was great, and I had to reinvent myself now, 10 years older, staying up late again at work and working to become a story guy. And so I worked in story, and then that kind of led to, and then directing. So all that traditional animation was great, and I would God, trade it for anything. And I wish anybody could enjoy that. If I rekindled any of that kind of love, it's like, well, then I get to direct, and I get to really understand what motivates a camera move, what motivates a cut. How do you transition from one scene to another? How do you reveal information in the most interesting way? So I'm in love with doing that now. And I still, I got my animation desk behind me. I still animate traditional animation on my own, like Superman Classic, Bizarro Classic, Flash Gordon Classic. Yeah. And now I'm doing Carman, the Road Rage Anti-Hero, because I mentioned I get Road Rage. Yeah.
Spoken like
it's hard to pinpoint. Yeah, that's right. I'm a product of my environment, for sure.
That's an interesting thing. Like maybe a book will be written about that one day, the death of 2D animation. I actually do wonder why 2D animation went away. I've heard conflicting answers. Like it's cheaper to go CGI. Is that true?
No, CG is actually, it's still more complex. There's still more hands that have to be involved with modeling, lighting, rigging. It's still more expensive, but then the argument you can't make against it. It's just, it's been more profitable. Somehow it's been more accessible to audiences. It's easier to control. I know now directing on a show like Elena, that's CG. When you do a 2D show, it's hard to build a team that can draw at that level of that we did at Disney, and to get a whole team aboard. And if you can't, at least Elena, if there's a scene that's not animated perfectly, she'll look like Elena. She'll always look good. She'll always look consistent.
Because it's kind of the rig, right? It's the rig.
It's yeah. So there are definitely aspects of it that are very appealing to work on. And so when you're running a studio and you're seeing like, wow, it's really hard to get a whole team that can draw at this level. What if they leave? But if we go CG, and then CG is just a little bit more predictable, and the hits, just like it's been, the audience somehow, are attracted, and you could blame it on like new technology. It's innovative. It's kind of cool. But here we are. It's 20 years later, and those movies are still doing really well. But I still hope, with Netflix making 2D movies, and they've been really cool. I hope it ignites. Maybe there'll be another renaissance, because when I got hired, it was a renaissance. It'd been Walt Disney kind of ushered it in, weathered the storm of flops here and there because he loved it so much and stayed with it. And then once he died, a company's not going to take those flops. And it was almost dying, and dying until it came back with Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. I just hope somehow maybe that can happen again. If people have that love for a moving drawing is like magic to me. Like, I'm grown up now. I don't believe in magic anymore. But when I see a drawing that's moving and breathing and living, and I care about it, that's like seeing magic to me. And I hope there are enough people that could support that.
So what did you think of Into the Spider-Verse?
It's a mixed bag for me. That God, gorgeous, beautiful. Oh my God, I love the way it looks. It's amazing, and it's the shot selection is very cinematic and very movie. And then there's other things that I didn't connect, like the humor, like it didn't hit me as hard as I would have liked it to. And
humor's hard, isn't it?
Humor is
Humor's
hard, man. It's hard to make people laugh. And so I would see jokes that maybe, didn't land as well for me as I would hope. And then just like the amped up volume, like I love my favorite comedy of all time is This Is Spinal Tap. And I don't know if you've ever heard that thing about this goes to 11, turning up to something to 11. And it's become part of the vernacular. To turn something up to 11 means
Why don't you just make it louder and change the labels?
Oh my God, I'm glad you know the movie because not everybody remembers it. But to turn something up to 11 means to just go all the way beyond, right? And there's parts to Spider-Man, just for my taste. It's just my taste. Other people love the movie, but for me, it's like it's cranked up to 11 so much that I get exhausted. When I watch 5 or 10 minutes of it, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But I do get a little exhausted. I kind of wish it had some peaks and valleys to it. But that's me being a pain in the ass. Like the thing is gorgeous, and there's sequences that are directed brilliantly. But then there's the parts that I
see what you mean. It can be sensory overload.
It is for me. Yeah.
It can be sensory overload. But I thought like the thing that I was telling people was the last time that I felt that way about watching a movie was the first Toy Story. Because it felt like something. It felt like a door was being opened.
Yeah, you definitely knew you were watching a game changer.
Yeah, but my favorite part of that movie is all of this new soundtrack, new hip hop type of soundtrack, and then when Peter B. Parker is swinging, all of a sudden it's Saint Elmo's Fire.
That's great to go old school.
That's nice. It's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Now to close this off, why do you think your pitch for Superman didn't go through? Did they ever tell you?
I never got a straight. It was heartbreaking because I thought it was going to happen. Handshake agreement. We can't wait to be working with you. Kind of meeting happened, and I thought it was going to happen, and my feet didn't touch the ground. This was back in 2011. So this is 10 years ago when Superman Classic came out. And and then for about a year, God, it really lingered for a year where I was assured it would happen, but no contracts were signed, so it was never official. But I felt like it was going to happen. And then when it didn't happen, I didn't get a reason. And that was heartbreaking. And to find out in an indirect way, like, it hurts. And it's Superman, and it will always hurt. It's never going to completely go away. And then years go by, and then about 5 years ago, just before Elena, I got a job directing some Bugs Bunny cartoons. And I thought, oh my God, and I told you I love Bugs Bunny, and it was the greatest.
Was that Wabbit?
And so Wabbit, yeah, I got to do
you worked on Wabbit? That's awesome.
Yeah. It was super fun. Oh my God, maybe the funnest like professional experience I've ever had, because just you're in a story room, and you're coming up with what would Bugs Bunny do, and it was always empowerment things, or he would change into a costume, or he would make a cake really fast. It was the greatest. And while I was there, I knew Elena was waiting for me, so I had the job on Elena, and Wabbit I didn't get to finish. I got to work on it for a couple months, and then I said, well, you guys, Elena's ready for me. I had already agreed to it. I have to go. And during that day, I said goodbye to all the executives and made sure I said thank you. And one of them was kind enough, and maybe I shouldn't say his name because I don't know if you'd want me to say his name, but one of the executives was kind enough to, say, hey, I'm sorry that like Superman never happened. And I go, oh, thanks. Just like nobody ever told me why it didn't happen. And then he said, and he goes, look, I don't know if this is the thing, but it could be this, Rob. That was 2011. We were kind of in a legal battle with the Schuster heirs.
Oh, yeah.
And we kind of did pump the brakes on some Superman stuff for a little bit. Now, I don't know if that's the reason, but that might have been the reason. And I'm sorry nobody told you, because, obviously you're passionate and you're emotionally invested in this. And it might have helped to have somebody tell you something, but maybe we weren't allowed to say something. But he's like, so that might have been it, but I don't know for sure.
That's true. And since you go retro with your Superman, that might have been a problem.
Yeah, because then in the intervening years, then Man of Steel happened, and now they have their Superman that they want to promote now.
Yeah, because Action Comics #1 technically is not work for hire and could eventually go into the public domain. So
yeah,
technically, anyone can do anything with that version of those characters.
It's weird, yeah, because when they created that copyright law, they probably thought 75 years is enough time. But now that they're all kind of coming up,
Yeah.
Companies still exist, like Walt Disney companies still exist, and they still want to control Mickey Mouse, so they find ways to extend it. And we're all getting into this new territory where we don't know how things are going to play out.
So would you pitch it again? Would you ever pitch it again?
Oh my God, it's Superman. I obviously would always want it to happen. And maybe one thing that's cool about retro is it never goes out of style.
It will never will, yeah.
Just by the definition, it's retro. It's always retro cool. I would always, of course, be open to it. And I still do have that Brainiac classic in full animatic with John and Jennifer's voices. I did get another family member from the Superman family to voice Brainiac, but I don't know if I can say his name. I don't know if he wants me to say his name, but I got another actor from the Superman family as Brainiac for that one. So I still have it already. God, I'd love to animate it. I don't want to get Warner Brothers mad at me, but it's still there waiting. I got a Lex Luthor classic written. I know the angle I'd want to take with Lex Luthor. Oh my God, I would always, phone is always are ready for them to call me if they want to.
Last question, in case they're watching.
Yeah.
You're in an elevator. There's new leadership in Warner Brothers now. So maybe, you're in an elevator with somebody who's in charge from Warner Brothers. You've got the length of the elevator ride to tell them your pitch for Superman. What do you say?
I would say, go back to what the core concept is. The worse the times are, the more cynical the times are, the more we need a guy that still believes in something and can inspire others to believe in something. And is an empowerment story for people who feel like they're weak. The guy that, when you're in trouble, this is the guy that we all want to have show up.
Thank you, Robb Pratt.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Man, what a pleasure meeting you and getting to chat this stuff with you for a while. I had a blast.
I can talk about Superman all day.
Yeah. Yeah, me too, man. He's a great character.
Thank you. You have a good night, Robb.
You too, man. Take care. All right.